ideally you're going to do this while you're setting the appointment. Like, am I dealing with somebody who is going to ask me 7,000 questions? If so, then I probably want to be armed with everything that we have to offer. If we're dealing with somebody who's like, cut straight to the point, what is my house worth and how much is it going to cost me to sell it? They're probably going to want to see stuff in a spreadsheet. They are your engineer brain type people. So if you've ever done a DISC assessment, you know you can kind of try to figure out people's personality profiles. That's really the first thing you want to do, is you're kind of trying to figure them out when you're setting the appointment. And if you have if you just have the email communications or text messages and you haven't actually talked to them, you know, I feel like right away when you meet somebody at the door, you can kind of figure out, who am I dealing with here? How's this going to go? I've been on some where they're very short and curt, and, you know, I know then kind of how I need to adjust the way I'm acting. And then if they're like, come on in, you know, I've sat and had breakfast with people. It's awesome. So you just kind of have to prepare to, like I said, meet them where they are. So first thing I do, I made the appointment. Ideally, you always want to call and confirm the day of the appointment that they're still good. I can't tell you how awkward it is to show up at somebody's house and they're like, I totally forgot, or you waste your time and they have forgotten you show up and they're not even home. So good morning. You're good. So always call or confirm the appointment, and then just say, has anything changed since we last spoke? Sometimes I'll talk to somebody the day before, sometimes we make an appointment a week out. Hey, has anything changed since we last spoke that I need to know about or take into consideration? Because you don't know if they've had a major life change, that they may have told you that they really weren't motivated to move on Monday, but then on Tuesday they got a job transfer, and now that's going to change how you're going to be presenting. So one of the biggest things when you're making the appointment, you really want to keep them on the phone enough to figure out what's the why. What are they trying to accomplish? Why are they moving? Because you want to know the big picture. Not only that, you want to be prepared to have the conversation. Okay, if you're selling and we're looking for something else, let's go ahead and have that conversation too, so I can be thinking of how I'm going to help you on the buyer side. So you're also prepared when you get done with your listing presentation to flip it over to a buyer consultation if they're looking to sell and buy. And then one of the things I do when I'm talking to them about their house, obviously you're going to get their address. I always try to look it up while I'm talking to them. Like, oh yeah, I know that neighborhood. I sold such and such out there, or our office has sold such and such out there. So you already sound like the neighborhood expert, like Tina says. We're out there all the time. And then the first thing I want to do is say, hey, I saw you bought it in 2010. What kind of updates or upgrades or improvements have you made since then? None? Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure I'm taking all that in consideration, because I'm going to do some preliminary pricing. So again, you're already kind of setting that up. It's preliminary pricing, but I really need to set my eyes on it to give you an actual price. And then I ask them, do you feel like there's any upgrades or updates that need to be done? So again, they will start telling you what they feel like needs to happen. So you can use that information for when you start pulling pricing. I'm not going to pull the cream of the crop if they're like, my deck's falling off, I got a hole in the roof, whatever. And then, so when you're asking about upgrades, I love to say, and approximately how much do you think you paid for that? Or how much do you think that cost you? Because then you're able, in their brain, they're like, well, I've added $35,000 worth of stuff to this house. So they're going to assume you're going to add $35,000 of stuff to your CMA as well. So I always ask what kind of improvements they've done. So then, like I said, when I get to the home, the first thing I like to do is ask for a tour. And when you ask for a tour, be very engaged. This is their house. This is their baby, especially if they're that way. Like I said, they're like, come on in. I'll show me your favorite things about the house. Imagine I was a buyer. What things made you purchase this house? Because this may be something that, that's probably going to be the reason our next buyer purchases this house. So tell me the things that are your favorite things. And like I said, be very engaged. One of the favorite things I started doing, I think I learned this from Lee Brown. She had a notepad. I bought these from the real estate store and I just made copies of them. But you take something, and I don't fill this out. I don't have time to go down every checkbox when you're there. I'd stay there for 2 hours. But I at least kind of go through their floor coverings, and like, you just look like you're paying attention. You are really taking notes of everything that they've got in their house. And I feel like they appreciate that. They feel like you're really, again, engaged. I can't tell you how many appointments I've gone on and they had other agents come before me and they're like, well, she just blew through here. She was in and out in 10 minutes. Sometimes they're like that, especially if you've got your high D person who's like, just tell me your price and get out. Okay, I'm gonna go run some numbers and I'll get back to you in a little bit. That's all they want to hear. But like I said, it kind of gives you some great questions to ask, as far as what is the age of the roof and the HVAC when they're talking about the upgrades. So like I said, I feel like just walking through and taking notes already makes them feel like you're paying attention. So then once we go through the home, we talk about everything. Lee Brown used to say, gush over their closets or gush over something, just like, this is going to be our wow factor. I can't wait to see this in a picture, and that's why you're kind of having that staging conversation as you're going through too. When you walk in and there's like 7 pieces of furniture in the room, I tell people my typical rule of thumb is, we take 30% of the furniture out of the room and 50% off the walls. Now that depends. If you walk in a minimalist house, then, they probably don't have 2 things on the wall, so you don't have to take 50% off. But if they have a lot of stuff, it sounds less judgy if you're like, well, my typical rule of thumb is, instead of you have too much furniture in this space. And then what I tell them is, imagine this is in a picture. Most of our buyers are going to come because they saw a picture on the internet. So when you look in this picture, do you see everything that I see? There's so many, like when you have your gallery walls, there's not one piece of art that I'm staring at. I now see 10 things across this wall. It's very visually distracting. And so you're helping them understand it's not that I don't like your stuff, but when you see it on a picture of this big on the internet, how is that going to appear? And once you say it that way, again, I think it takes the personal side away from it. The same thing with really bright colored rooms. It's kind of like, wow, this is a gorgeous gold in person, but on the internet, it's going to look like my yellow wall over there. It's going to look really bright. So maybe we should, consider repainting. Again, I know our conversations are different in this market, but I feel like if you are trained to be the same and comfortable in this market, then you'll be great when the market's not quite as easy too. So once we get done, I'm always kind of like, let's, sit down on the kitchen table and chit chat, ask me your questions. I know I've thrown a lot at you as we walk through, so go ahead and ask me your questions. And getting them talking, I think, kind of makes it a little more comfortable, especially for the agent. I feel like, okay, I've just talked a lot while we walk through. Now let me listen. And a lot of times they'll tell you, oh, I had 2 agents come before you and they said I could get $450 for it. So I just wanted to see what you would say too. I mean, they would just half the time tell you what you need to know. Or if they're very quiet, you're like, okay, well, I brought some material for us to go over. And if at any time, we're going through, just feel free to ask me questions. Any questions so far of y'all while I'm just talking at y'all? So again, when we sit down on our material, I always bring, I've got custom folders made. I think this makes a big, big, big difference when you show up, that you have at least a really nice professional display of your paperwork. I'm even big about, a lot of times I'll bring a manila envelope or a manila folder that has like the tax card, my information. A lot of times, my CMA is more like this, and I bring them a pretty CMA. But even with my manila folders, I have a label of their name on it. It just looks that much more professional than my scratch handwriting. So things like that, I feel like make a big difference. And then we'll go through my listing presentation. So again, I've already tried to gauge what kind of person am I dealing with here. And so, I'm like, I've got a great seller's guide here for you, that's going to walk you through, and we'll go through that in just a minute. Got a great seller's guide here. It's going to walk you through kind of what to expect. I also always take my iPad, because I typically have my contracts already pre-done when I get there. So if they say that they're ready, we're going to sit there and sign paperwork. And by the time I leave, it's being DocuSigned to them. I think, in my opinion, you're just manifesting getting it. If you've already prepared for it, you took an extra 10 minutes to just plug in the tax information and a, listing agreement, then I think it's worth it to just kind of feel like I'm overly prepared. And if you've got them excited, you want them to sign right then. So anyway, I've got the seller's guide we're going to go through. I've got some paperwork we can talk about. Is it more important that you understand the process, or are you mainly, considering pricing? I know we talked before that, you don't have to move right now. So obviously it's got to make sense for you to move. So tell me what that looks like. Again, just keep asking them questions so that they are explaining to you what their ideal situation is. And then you're not having to sell them on what your opinion is of their ideal situation. Because I've had people feel like you come on too strong, like, I'm not ready for that yet. We just wanted to start the conversation of, we might be thinking about moving in 6 months. So we just wanted to get an idea of what we needed to do to get ready and, our price range at this time. I just went on a listing appointment like that 2 weeks ago. And so I was like, we've got step A, B, C, and D. You're telling me you want to move in June. You're going to move into a rental house. This is what needs to happen. And like literally every 2 weeks, they're going to check in because they got a ton of stuff to get rid of and everything else. But I'm paying attention to what their plan is. And then it doesn't seem overwhelming because we've got 5 months to accomplish it, instead of leaving them with a 2-page list of everything that has to be done. Does that make sense? Again, just kind of gauging your people. So a lot of times I ask them, I'm like, I've got a fantastic 17-page presentation here. Would you like me to go through it? Or do you want to just kind of, I'll answer your questions and we can kind of go from there. So your high Ds are like, do not hand me a 17-page PowerPoint presentation. Because I also say I have it on PowerPoint if you want to see it. Now your I's and your S's, they want to sit there and talk, and they want to, they want to know everything about you and tell me who this is and what do you think about this. So like I said, I always bring it. I never leave this. I have a 1 sheet, which I meant to print off. I'll show it to you guys, but it's kind of like a very condensed version of this. I have it for buyers and for sellers that essentially says marketing professional pictures. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I leave that 1 sheet with them. The reason I do not leave this is I can't tell you how many other listing agents presentations I have because the sellers gave them to me. They left them and the sellers were like, we interviewed the other people. This is their presentation. You want it? I'm like, actually, I will take that. Just, no shame in our game. I mean, you want to know what your competitors are doing, but that's why I don't leave mine back. Which is not a huge secret. One of the next things I'm going to talk about is I've actually got mine online. So I skipped ahead of myself a little bit. So with my seller's guide, again, if they seem like they're going to have a lot of questions, I like to go ahead and give them something to be working on when we set the appointment. So I bought the domain name. It is. Is there a way to make that go away, Timothy? So far.
Do not.
So AprilStevensSellerGuide.com. There's a free home valuation tool, and it's going to be updated. My entire seller guide right here, they can see it online. $9 a year domain, but I can send it to them and say, hey, so you can be in preparation of our meeting, just so you can get to know me and my team. We have this here. Be careful though if you do put a home valuation tool in there, because you need to know what that value came up with before you get there. One other thing I do is I always pull their Zestimate before I go, because they've pulled it. So don't roll up with a CMA that shows 350 and their Zestimate says 485, because they're going to look at you like you don't know what you're talking about, because Zillow said. Now, I don't ever use that, but I also like to know, okay, why did it come up with this value? Oh, well, your neighborhood's beside $1 million neighborhood. So that's the difference in being a local area expert and knowing that you can't comp a 1,200 square foot house to a 4,000 square foot all brick house. So those are 2 things that I feel are important. The other thing I do, so I've got I use Toolkit CMA. I don't love it. It's a program that will generate a really nice CMA presentation. I'm trying to find something a little nicer than this. But regardless, it's just something that you can leave with them that does give them values of their home. And all you have to do, what I do is I do my CMA on MLS, and then I get the MLS numbers and I plug it in here. And then this turns it into a nice, here's where all the it puts it on a map. It puts the property side by side. And then you can go in and make adjustments if you want to. I typically don't. I typically say, I've done my homework ahead of time. I look at these homes. These are very comparable to your home. So I've made some adjustments, and this is where I've arrived at my pricing. And then it gives you a range based on the MLS numbers in there, and you can manipulate this. So I've done that before. If I feel like, okay, I needed to add an extra $30,000 because I had an in-ground pool and none of my comps did, then I can go in there and manipulate that. And then always with a seller net sheet. A lot of times this is where I start talking about what our fee is. Sometimes, to be honest though, if you don't bring it up, a lot of times they don't, and you don't get to it till you're in the paperwork. And that's why I'm like, does everything I said sound good? We can go ahead and start coming soon marketing, which I feel like is the easy button for sellers. Takes that pressure of, oh my gosh, I got to get my house clean this weekend. And so I'm like, well, we're going to do coming soon, so no pressure. So that'll give us time. I can go ahead and start marketing it to my company. Heck, we might even get sight unseen offers and we don't even have to hit the market. you know, so if we go ahead and get the listing paperwork signed, then I can go ahead and get to work for you. And my favorite thing to say is to find you the best buyer, not just a buyer. We all know I'm going to find you a buyer in this market, but we want the best buyer. You've explained to me that it's important that A, B, C, and D fall into place. So we need to find a buyer who's going to be flexible. You know, we have all the leverage right now in this market, let's be real. And most of your sellers know that. So, you know, if you're telling me it's okay that you don't move until June, so you don't have to move it twice, or you'd rather stay until the kids get out of school, well, then our best buyer is going to be somebody who's A, either willing to go ahead and close and lease back, or B, willing to set the closing date out far enough. So again, you're playing to their what they're trying to accomplish, and it's easing that stress off of them. So I think people really love to hear that, especially those that are very obsessed with their houses and they're emotionally tied to it. And they're like, I really do want it to be the right person. And I'm like, me too. That's why we are going to make sure that we find the best buyer. And my plan is to do coming soon. I feel like every house should be coming soon for at least a week. I think 30 days, they can start to feel stale. But I think every house should be coming soon for at least a week. And then you're like, this is going to give me time to get pictures and everything done, and us to make sure you are, you know, ready to rock and roll. And again, I can go ahead and start marketing it, but I can't do that until you sign the listing paperwork. So you ready? You know, and then like, you know, again, that's another reason why I like having my iPad with me, is because, and I've got full keyboard and everything, and I already have my zip forms pulled up, but I've got my presentation on my iPad and I'm going through my slides. And then it's like, okay, we're already here. Computer's already up. Doesn't feel like I'm going to bring out, you know, my briefcase. And it feels very overwhelming, I think, to the sellers. All right, I'm doing all the talk. Any questions so far? And we'll do a Q&A at the end, of course, but.
Do you have them sign it, like as you're going through the
So
agency form?
typically what I do, and I also highly recommend always bring a printed set with you. Those can be blank because you've already got the information on the tax card, so you can fill that out. You're going through it. But I have had made the mistake a couple times that I didn't have it with me and the person wasn't comfortable digitally signing. And so I've always got a blank, just a folder like this of a listing agreement. I recommend a standard offer purchase, all of that. Just have your little emergency kit. If I need to pull over on the side of the road and write an offer, I can do it, because I've done it. I've written offers on the hood of my car multiple times. So the same thing, you just want to be kind of prepared for either situation. If I'm digitally doing it, then I'm like, as soon as I leave, my assistant's going to shoot this over to you and it'll be in your inbox. And as soon as you click through, we'll be good to go. And so, like I said, if you don't have an assistant, then you can just go ahead, you know, go zip form to DocuSign or whatever you use, DigiSign, while you're in there. And then be like, all right, it's in your email. And then it feels very like, so excited to work together.
If you don't have an assistant, you do have an assistant.
Yes,
They don't need to know
exactly.
that.
They don't need to know that you pulled over at the BP as soon as you left. And we're like, dot, dot, dot. Because I do, you know, I do try to get in and out in under an hour if I can. Just because I feel after that, they are glazing over. You have just talked them slam to death, because we do go over a lot, especially once the paperwork's done. So I try to stay in and out in under an hour. Now, again, if they have made dinner and they have invited me to dinner, I'm gonna stay. I'm just gonna hang out. Are there any questions on Zoom?
Nobody has asked anything on Zoom yet. I have a question though.
Mhm.
How do you identify your person that you're having that information for? Because you were saying like high D and the different personality types. Is there a certain thing that you do to kind of do that, or is it just you're prepared for what other direction it can go?
A little bit of both. And again, that comes with training and role playing. So I'll start doing a lot more in this office. But you know, if you've done a DISC assessment, you know, a DISC is a very direct, high energy, low socialness to them. You know, an I and an S are very detail oriented. The S's are, I think, it's the S's that are very social, and they're the ones that want to fix breakfast and have you hang out, and they want to be your friends throughout the transaction. The I's are very detail oriented. They're probably going to read every page of this while I'm sitting there. Or the C's. The C's are the ones that are going to read every page of this while I'm sitting here like, oh, okay.
I've had a lot of those recently.
Well, there's a lot of competition out there right now, and so they're trying to make sure they completely understand what they're getting into. But you know, we went on a listing appointment a couple weeks ago, and the lady met us at the door, and she was very short in her emails and text messages, short on the phone. So I knew exactly we were dealing with a high D. So I knew I was coming with a spreadsheet. I had this on my iPad, but I was coming with a spreadsheet. And she met us at the door and she's like, okay. I mean, and so we start going through and I'm slowly trying to warm her up and she slowly starts to warm up because you're complimenting things like, oh, you know, this house was built in 2005. The shower looks like it's, you know, been redone. And they're like, oh yeah, we just did it 3 years ago. I'm like, well, you did everything right. This is all the colors that are in style right now. So kudos to you. You were ahead of the game. And so once I started complimenting her and her home, she kind of just, you know, her wall came down just a little bit until we sat down at the kitchen table and then it came right back up. I mean, built out of bricks, it came right back up. And I could tell she was like, you know, she was doing for sale by owner. And so she felt like she already knew what her house was worth. She knew I've sold houses before. I know this, I know that, you know, and I'm just kind of like, okay. I said, so it sounds like the most important thing you want to hear is how much is your house really worth and how much can we get how much can we get for you? And how can we make this process easier? She was like, yeah, pretty much. And I was like, so I talked a little bit about the things that we would be handling and how that would be off of her. You know, I don't know if you realize that you'd be letting strangers into your house. Are you comfortable with that? I noticed you have 2 kids upstairs, you know, just something to keep in mind, you know, whereas when we are showing it, they're coming in with a licensed person and we know who they are. So just a few things of trying to prove value. But again, she was glossing over and I was like, all right, so what we're going to do now is now that I've seen your fantastic house, I'm going to take a look at the comps and we're just going to get you some numbers because it sounds like the bottom line is the most important thing to you. And so she was one I'm showing, you know, the quick CMA too. And it's really important when you show this to people, a lot of times they've already done their own homework. And I make a point to say, I know you're looking at this average price per square foot. I don't look at average price per square foot. I've also taken and made sure that all these houses are comparable. And then I made adjustments. And that's how I arrived at my number. Very similarly to how an appraiser is going to do it. I did, you know, checks and balances, and I just needed to put my eyes on your house and see what your house had that the others didn't. And you always want to make it sound like their house has something that it doesn't. Now, if it really is, you know, struggling or atrocious, then you have to say, you know, the comps that I pulled didn't have some of the, you know, issues, you know, the deck's falling off type of thing. So we're going to have to take that into consideration in our pricing if we're not going to have those items fixed before we hit the market.
Cindy said, I don't think the majority of the for sale by owners know anything about what due diligence money is about. Do you ever bring that up or not when those for sale by owner folks think they may or may not know anything? Yeah, so great question. So typically when I feel like, okay, I've sold myself, now it's going to be about where do we go from here? Then the conversation shifts to, well, let me explain how this process works. When we hit the market, we use a call service. We use, you know, I kind of go through how showings work and that we're going to know who's going through and all of that. But then I just totally lost my train of thought. You're going through your
due diligence. Yeah. So I'm like, and let me explain how, especially if they've not bought a house in the last 5 years, you want to say, let me explain how things have changed as well since the last time you purchased. Really, it's the last 5 minutes. Well, but as far as the contracts go, and I always say, no, we're going to go through this again when we get an offer, but I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. We're going to be negotiating 2 fees and 2 dates. So your buyer's going to come in and we're going to get some non-refundable money, you know, to take your house off the market. They're essentially buying time to get your house off the market. And it's a good time to have, to set that expectation there. You know, the house of your price point, I would anticipate we would see due diligence fees of this, this, and this. And so just know that once we initially go off the market, here's what to expect next. And that's, some of my seller's guide walks them through it, talks about the inspection process. It talks about the appraisal process, because a lot of people are very like, so when does the appraisal happen? And they don't realize, I'm kind of doing a pre-appraisal and then we're going to have the conversation about, the appraisal process. And a lot of people don't understand that the buyer's lender is the one in control of that. Because I've had several that are like, well, I don't want such and such appraising a house. I'm like, we don't have any control over that. But that's a good time to have that conversation of what they are thinking their best buyer looks like. We want somebody who's going to put down this amount of money. We want somebody who's going to look past these cosmetic issues that we just discussed and go from there. But yeah, that's a great point. They don't understand that due diligence money and earnest money are completely different. Not only that, but we don't hold the earnest money anymore. So if you haven't been in the business, for several years, it used to be that we as the listing agents held the earnest money, and that was a pain. You had to be in trust accounts, and we realized we were just moving money back and forth with the attorney. So I was like, well, you don't even have to worry about that. We don't have a trust account. We don't touch that earnest money. It goes straight to the attorney's office that we're going to be closing with. And it just kind of, you're always leading them to that next step, like kind of closing at every part of the process. Like once we go under contract, this is going to happen. And then you're just constantly moving the conversation forward.
How do you feel about net sheets? Do you bring them on every showing?
Because this is when we start having the commission conversation. And again, if they, when I get to this, I'm like, do you understand what your fees are associated with selling the home? And I'm like, well, as a seller, you're only responsible for 3 things technically: the deed prep, the excise tax, and the commission. And the commission is the marketing fee that I charge in order to find the best buyer for your house. I will say I would go ahead and start changing your brain and your verbiage away from, and it also includes paying buyer's agent. No seller wants to hear that. And with the NAR rules coming down, it's not going to be that way anymore. So in my opinion, this is my marketing fee to find you the best buyer, whether it's me, somebody on my team, somebody in my company, or another agent. If it's another agent, regardless, I'm going to share this fee with whoever brings the best buyer. So it doesn't sound like you're paying for something that you're not getting the benefit of anymore. Does that make sense? It's totally my marketing fee. And I say that as well when I get to the transaction fee, that this is a transaction fee that my brokerage charges. 3 years from now, when you're needing your HUD again, we're keeping up with that. We've got all of your documents stored in the cloud. We're paying for cloud storage. So this is a transaction fee that we charge for that's separate from the marketing fee. Again, it's never a hill we're willing to die on. And 9 times out of 10, if they're like, well, I don't know about this transaction fee, I'm like, that's fine. I'll cover it out of my commission. And then 9 times out of 10, when you say that, they're like, well, no, I don't want you to have to do that. It's fine. But, so you make the 2 things sound different. But my commission is always my marketing fee to find you the best buyer. This is what, why I'm able to have professional photography done and help you with lining all these things up with my resources. That's all a part of my marketing fee.
I've found that if you have that net sheet, most agents aren't showing up with it. So when they see all the numbers broke down, they really don't even look at what you're charging them. 9 times out of 10, they're just looking at that bottom number. What am I taking home after my mortgage is paid? And I always have I do the same thing. I have my iPad or my desktop with me or my laptop, and I can easily manipulate those numbers because everything I have before I go in there is a guesstimate. So if they have their mortgage statement with their payoff and all that, I can go in and easily just adjust it and then email it to them. Or I don't like leaving that. Yeah, but I like showing it to them because a lot of the time when you're trying to charge 6 or 7%, if their number's happy, they don't even look at the percentage of what you're charging.
Yep. A couple of things I have seen or had experience into. It's an easy segue to, once you feel like the conversation's going well, to go ahead, if you're not already in your computer and your iPad, let me just pull up zip forms and we'll run a seller net sheet. The thing I like about that is you can run 3 different scenarios. I remember I got beat out on a listing appointment. Again, it was a different market, but because the listing agent showed them a seller net sheet that had 3 different scenarios, and one of them had, no closing costs, or we had discussed back then when you did a lot of seller paid closing costs, her net number was higher and it was only a scenario. It wasn't the true net. It was just the scenario. She's like, I just really felt like she, gave us all of our options. And I was like, good feedback. So if you use the seller net sheet on zip forms, it has 3 different options. So you can say, if you're going through it, especially right now where we're like, I don't care what condition it is, just let me throw it on the market. You can say, okay, we recognize we can have about $10,000 worth of work that needs to be done on the home. If we were to have this work done, then I think, we could possibly list for this. So this would be your net. However, it's going to cost you this to get this work done. So that's that number. If we don't have the work done, I think we can get, we can list for this, and this is what we'll net. Is it worth it to you to go through having the house painted, the carpets cleaned, whatever those repairs are or upgrades are, to spend 10 to make 10? Is it worth it to you? Okay. You've at least talked them through their options. And it's showing how you're arriving at these numbers. And like Timothy said, if it's a good number, 9 times out of 10, they're like so excited. And then they're like, oh, okay. And that's when I'm going, so if you're good with it, I've got the paperwork right here, and you switch screens and
Yes.
you're right there, ready to roll. Trying to think, what else? Mm-hmm.
Have you ever gone on a listing appointment and you just didn't feel good about it? You just decided at the point to have to sell it, or do you just work through it?
Depends on how great the house is. I can get past me. No, there are times that I have felt like this is not gonna be, we're not gonna mesh well. This is not gonna be fun. But again, you have to decide, just like the listing appointment I was talking about with the for sale by owner. It was, I was gonna be dragging her through the transaction, not pushing her along. I was gonna be dragging her to try to get on my page. And so you just kind of have to figure out what it's worth, in my opinion. Because now if I feel like they're not good people, then no, I don't want to work with them. I don't want to work with somebody who's like, well, this is wrong, but we ain't telling them that. I'm like, oh, we are telling them that. You just told me, so now I have to tell them. So no, I have seen people kind of scoff, and they're like, I said, this is a material fact. And when we get to the paperwork, you're gonna have to fill out something that says, to the best of your knowledge, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm like, we can put it on there, but we're not gonna act like it doesn't exist. So, no deal is ever worth my license or being on the back of the bulletin, in my opinion. But it's a referral opportunity. You could always say, hey, I went on this appointment. They seem like it's going to be tough. Anybody want it? Because again, somebody's personality may work better with someone else.
We had a question from Cindy, or more of a comment. She was saying that she knows how to run comps, but she has issues with the adding value and really itemizing it out. Cindy, we are actually doing a class on February 23rd on how to read appraisals, and we're going to teach you guys how to do some quick CMAs and kind of talk about those adjustments. So if you guys haven't already put that on your calendar, it's in the Freedom Builders, but it'll go out again February 23rd. Have we had which appraisers coming?
Yep. Okay. And we're also going to talk about kind of what our industry averages they see. Now, I'll be honest, I don't go through as detailed as the appraisal is, but I look at the main points. Is there an extra bedroom? Is there a pool? Is there a third car garage? Things that are going to add, $5,000 to $10,000 worth of value different from what their neighbor has. Do they, and you got to look at things from a marketing value. That's one of the biggest conversations I have with sellers too, is what is the marketing value of this? For instance, you guys know as well as I do, if they've got 3 bedrooms on the first floor right now, that marketing value is higher than a 2-story. You've got a first floor bedroom or a ranch, still very popular. In my opinion, that deserves a little bit more value if I'm comparing it against everything else that's a 2-story. And people love to hear that. They're like, it's crazy. It does give you some dollar value, but it actually gives us more marketing value. I feel like there's going to be more buyers out there that want your house because of this feature. So, I've made an adjustment of this, and that's something that a FSBO is not going to know to do. And it makes them, again, feel good that theirs is better than everybody else's I'm comparing it to, because that's ultimately what they want to hear. Yeah, like I said, mainly if I do adjustments, when I do adjustments, they're on large items. I'm not going through like 2,000 square foot here. Most appraisers will tell you if it's a lot in a subdivision, a lot is a lot. I don't care if this is 0.4 acres and that one's 0.8. And that's an argument I hear a lot too when I'm going through my market analysis. They're like, well, ours is on an acre. And I'm like, your neighbor's 0.8, and appraiser is not going to make an adjustment for that. So I didn't make an adjustment for that because it's all about how the lot lives. You could be on an acre, but if the whole backyard is wooded versus half an acre that's completely cleared, they live differently. So we don't make adjustments for that.
Would you adjust for a house that, say, 2 houses that are almost identical? One's a 3-bedroom, one's a 4-bedroom, but they have the same square footage. Would you adjust for that? I've heard a lot of people asking lately, does the 4th bedroom really give you that much difference in equity if it's the same square footage?
I don't think it does as much as it used to. I think before it was a solid $10,000 or $15,000 adjustment. I think today I feel like it's more of a maybe $5,000 to $7,000 adjustment, because everybody's learning to live in less. We're, with open concept homes, it's not just how many rooms do we have. Now, a lot of people are combining spaces. It's just the way everything has kind of started to trend over the years.
Absolutely.
So, And it'll change, just like it does. As soon as we get on this trend, the new trend, like I said, 2 stories are becoming much more popular now because of pricing. We're having to go up versus out. Whereas before you couldn't hardly sell a 2 story. Now it doesn't matter how many bedrooms, how many square foot, if it's on the market.
It's a house, it's
It's
for
a
sale, I'll
house,
take
it's for
it.
sale. So, again, I think it's really important to know when you're doing your CMAs, what's going on in the neighborhood. I also pull active and coming soon comps and include those, because depending on what their timing is and when that hits the market, that's actually going to be your comp, not what closed. And I make sure I tell them that. I say, you know, it's really hard to do CMAs these days because we're going off of old data and this market is moving so quickly. So your neighbor listed for this and this, or like the FISBO we went to, she didn't know that another house had hit the market. I called the agent. It was a comparable house. I called the agent had multiple offers incoming soon. So we knew it was going to have multiple offers and was going to go under contract for higher than the list price that it was currently at, which pushed her list price up from where she had it as FISBO. So we were able to say, listen, I know you think it's worth 525, but honestly, when this house closes out in 35 days, your price just went up by, 3% because that one went under contract. And so I think, again, we were able to prove our value that we know what's going on over here that you didn't know about. And it would have been too late if you'd already been under contract with somebody for less. So.
Do you think it's a good idea to ask the seller if they want to do a home inspection?
So I'm on the fence on that. If you walk in and you're like, I really feel like we got some issues we're probably going to need to address, then I would recommend it. I'll be honest, through COVID, that was something that we offered and we took care of as a part of our marketing. We had all of our listings pre-inspected, and that was because we were doing so many sight unseen offers, and we felt like it was giving our sellers a little bit of an advantage when buyers weren't willing to go look at the house, but they were worried what they were or were not getting into. So I do think it's a good idea, especially if you're like, this is a good house, I know it's going to sell, but I'm a little worried that we're going to get into some things. And if you were on the JCAR meeting yesterday, Will Martin, who's our state attorney, was talking about the biggest issues they are getting calls on right now is buyers backing out that went under contract, sight unseen, losing their due diligence money, and whether or not there were actually material facts that were not disclosed. It's going to be a big issue with what we're seeing right now, especially when you've got $50,000 and $100,000 worth of due diligence money. And it's kind of like, how did you not know there was standing water in the crawl space? I just feel like from a seller standpoint, it gives them that much more leverage that they're not going to have to go back on the market. And that is kiss of death in this market. We don't ever want to go back on, because then it's, all the buyers are going, well, if that one's still on the market after 2 days, what's wrong with it? So I do feel like if you're concerned, like I had an older couple, they'd lived in the house since 1973. I know he doesn't go underneath that house on top of it. For them, it would be more stressful to have a contract and have this massive repair bill and then risk going out of contract and us not being able to finalize where they were moving to, than to spend $200, $300 on a preliminary listing, a pre-listing inspection. So it's a double-edged sword, because then you're also, responsible for what is found. But I feel like in this market,
It's not needed.
it's not necessarily needed, but I do feel like it may give you some leverage if you have a house that you're concerned about. But
Be careful with that, though. I've had sellers that get cold feet because they see what their house, the shape it's in, and they thought it was an amazing house, and now the home inspector just beat them up, and now their pride is hurt.
Yeah.
And
You
they're stressed
also-
about wanting to fix everything.
right, you also have to make sure that you're using a home inspector that understands this is a pre-listing. We are not looking for every nail pop, and we want you to hit the high points, hit the stuff that may be concerning for safety purposes or maintenance issues of the house. So like I said, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but I always ask the sellers if it's something they're interested in doing. 9 times out of 10, they say no. But I think it's fair to ask. The other thing, going back to pricing a little bit, I know we're seeing a lot of, well, can we just push it? We can always come down. So can we push it up? And that's where I'm telling people, here's the thing, my numbers, I know is an accurate marketable number. You're right, we could put it higher, but if we put it on the market and we sit there for 3 days, we have lost all of our leverage. If we price it right, 9 times out of 10, we're going to have multiple offers, and it's probably going to get us higher than where you wanted to start to begin with. because we still have all the leverage. We're the one calling 8, 10 agents going, hey, I've got multiple offers. Send me your best and final, not highest and best, because I don't know why agents don't hear highest and best. And you know, it never fails. You call them back in a multiple offer situation. Were they not even going to counter?
No,
No, that was the whole point of saying best and final. Give me your best, and that's what we're going to work off of. So, let me see, I have some other notes.
so it's important to discuss that with your sellers too, and find out those expectations of, what is the best offer.
Hmm.
So that way you can kind of try and coach those multiple offers a little bit, and you can say, we're looking for a high price point, we're looking for big due diligence, or we want to rent back. Know what your sellers need. It's infuriating when you call a listing agent and they're like, yeah, just whatever, bring us an offer. Like, give me some guidance. I want to win this.
Yes. Well, and again, those are the ones that you're like, okay, now I have taken everything that they've told me, let me digest that, because a lot of times they don't even know. I think another important conversation when you're having with people, especially if it's a seller who's considering selling, the number one obstacle that we have to overcome right now is, but I don't know where I'm going to go.
How do you overcome that?
So what I say is, no problem. We have a program for that. Just like Tina says, we always have a system or a program for that. And essentially, you just want to get the appointment. You want to get your foot in the door. So once I get in the door, then I'm talking him through coming soon. There's so many different ways you can do this. And that's when you're talking about, hey, we could do, office exclusive for right now. So there's not that pressure. You don't have to sell. You're not sitting on the market and you have to take an offer. But at the same time, we're going to be looking for this. And if we're finding that right buyer, then we may find a buyer that's willing to wait 4 months. I know this sounds crazy to you, but that's what we're dealing with in this market. And so because we are networking and we're talking to other agents so much, we kind of have a feel for what buyers are willing to do, what sellers are willing to do. And we can turn around and do the same thing for you for what you're trying to do. What I would hate for is for you to lose this opportunity with the amount of equity that you have right now because something hasn't hit the market today. Because if it hits the market today, we're going to be behind the 8 ball. I'm not even going to be able to write an offer on a house that's contingent on a house that's not even on the market yet. So we need to at least have our coming soon paperwork filled out. It doesn't mean that we have to hit the market in 30 days. Let's get our paperwork filled out so I can go ahead and start finding you a buyer, and we're going to be shopping at the same time. So that's one of the biggest ways to overcome it. And then just being very proactive in what they're looking for. And I'm really, as tough as this market is, I love it. I miss the days where we had to depend on each other as agents. We had to help each other out to get something sold. I mean, calling that agent last week and being like, hey, what is this house going to go under contract for? She can't tell me, but she can tell me she had multiple offers. She's going to, we know it's going to go above asking. So we had more intel than anybody else. I love the fact that we're having to work together as agents right now because our industry had gotten so passive. Like, I feel like I never spoke to agents on the phone and we'd close a deal and all we've done is text and email the entire time. So I think it's important to show that to your sellers as well. Hey, I'm working with 20 agents right now. We're leaning on each other to make sure that when I'm advising you on how much due diligence we're seeing in this area right now, because it varies from area to area. And I'm going to be reaching out to them to see who has this. I mean, it's literally like, we're all we all know somebody who's planning to sell, just not on the market yet. So it may be out there. They may be you, and they're going to hit the market tomorrow. And now we're not going to be ready.
Think out of the box. Don't be afraid to call other agents. I will call people that are under contract or just closed, and I will try and guide the conversation as much as I can. Just say yes or no. Mm-hmm. Where are we at? Like, I'm listing something that's very similar. Did you get an insane due diligence?
You just led me to another point. A really awesome thing to do as well. If you're using comps that are in their neighborhood, which you should be, I would call the listing agents and say, how many offers did you have? Because now you're telling your seller, so there's 8 buyers we know of that didn't get that house. So we probably have 8 that we can count on for yours, because that one just closed 2 weeks ago and there weren't, 8 people didn't get it. So, I'm going to try to figure out who those agents were and reach out to them and go ahead and let them know. But again, another good reason to do coming soon for at least a week or so is just so you get leads and phone calls on your listings. I think, that's one thing that's making it hard right now is we were used to getting so many more buyers off of our listings, and because we're hitting the market going under contract in 24 hours, we don't even have the opportunity. What other questions? See,
I did have one.
and we can do some role play, like I said, if somebody wants to kind of do an overcoming objections.
Was there anything else in here? Anybody want to role play? I had a question about your roles.
Couple questions have been asked lately.
No, go ahead.
I'm
Go.
sorry. Like, how do you address when it is less relational now, I think, than it has been in the past, and it is more about, because there is so much competition with other agents and most people are interviewing, how do you address questions like, why should I choose you?
Mhm.
What makes your firm different? What can you offer me that somebody else didn't? Because we all pretty much offer the standard across the board, same things. What's your niche? What's your expertise? You know, what are things that we can say to make us stand out when it's not just, oh, I like you, you're sweet, or, you know, it's not personality. It's what makes you different.
One of the things I've been using, keep in mind, we are a convenience driven industry, or a convenience driven generation now, I guess you could say, a convenience driven world. And so the word I like to use is, well, I run a concierge style service. And so I'm going to take all the stress and headache that you've been worried about off of you. So behind the scenes, I'm going to be handling everything. You're not going to feel these pressures. You know, we're going to keep you up to date on what's going on. And we're going to make sure that we're looking out for what makes things easier on you. Because this is what is keeping, you know, there's a reason they didn't call Open Door and just sell it straight out. So they're willing to be a little bit inconvenienced, but they're not going to be willing to be a lot inconvenienced. So we need to make it feel like you are going to be the butler that meets them at the front and gives them VIP treatment all the way through, because that's how they want to feel. They feel like, you know, they have their, you know, high horse. They're on their high horse right now. I'm in control, and they are to a degree. And so you want to let them know, while you are, I also want to make sure this is easy on you, that this is, you know, an enjoyable experience. And because every bit of it's going to be overwhelming. You know, if you've ever moved before, there's nothing about it that's not overwhelming, unfortunately. And so I think just calming them nerves and making them feel like it's a concierge style service. You're, you know, Marty always used to say, you're walking in a Nordstrom versus Walmart when you use us. And I do, I mean, I feel like on our team, we do run that way. I mean, we've got inside people who are constantly touching our clients, and we're talking to them and, you know, fighting for them behind the scenes. One of the best things, Tracy, O'Dowd used to say, if you get to the closing table and your client's like, wow, I didn't see you do anything. It's like, then I did my job. You have no idea everything we handled back here that you never even saw. And so, you know, maybe say, I know you've heard horror stories in the news about this, and this. You know, we do everything within our power to make sure that this is a very smooth transition.
I have something to add to that, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Tina did a scripts training the other day for sale by owners and expireds. And there was a similar objection. So someone calls and they're like, well, what are you going to do to sell my house that the other people didn't do? Her objection was, I'm going to pick up the phone and call all of the 8 top agents in the market. And I'm going to notify them that your house is for sale in the market. It's not just MLS. I'm going above and beyond. I'm networking in ways that you never even thought to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that. I wrote it down and I was just like, that's something that I'm going to add in to my objection handling, because that is, we get that a lot. We're like, what are you going to do for me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to tailor my marketing plan to you. We're going to get your house sold, hopefully incoming soon. And we're going to do this all. Well, you don't have to stress about it.
Right, exactly. Well, like I said, that's another reason I feel like using the verbiage, we're going to find the best buyer that is going to make this the easiest, smoothest transition for you. Because the best buyer is also one that's going to pay you what you want, but it's not going to stress us out, you know. And again, I'm talking them through, like, we're seeing appraisal waivers now. We're seeing home inspection waivers. You know, these are things that I'm going to be negotiating, so that all you have to do is sit back and wait for me to tell you where to go to closing. And you don't even have to go to that, actually. We just have the documents. You can sign them in our office and I go to closing for you. And so again, it sounds like, just sit back and let me sell your house, and then you'll get a check, and you know, we handle everything. I do close with that. Like, you don't even have to go to closing if you don't want to. We'll have you sign your paper, because they don't remember, as a seller, You only have 3 pieces of paperwork to sign. To them, closing is an all-day process. It's gonna take forever, because that's how it was when they bought the house. And so that's something you don't even have to go to closing. We'll have everything prepared at the office and I'll go to closing for you. And we don't typically go to the closing because we don't even sit in the same room anymore, but they don't know that. It just sounds like, wow, one more thing I don't have to worry about. Or some other objections?
I had one about the pricing too, that I just remembered that we were talking about earlier. List price versus what they're gonna get, like explaining that difference. List price, we're listing it where we think it's gonna appraise at based on our industry knowledge. So explaining that's why we want to list there versus, their magic number is $20,000 higher. And although you may be able to meet the magic number, listing it at the right price and why it's important to do that.
So that brings me to a good point. One thing when I was saying we sit down at the table and I just listen, a lot of times part of that conversation is, so have you thought about what you feel like the house is worth? If they tell you that, it's gold. I mean, and so I try to find a really nice way, depending on how they are, like the one that was a FSBO, she had it on the internet. So I knew how much she thought, well, if you're planning to sell it yourself, that's another FSBO objection. How much do you feel like it's worth, and figure out what their number is. And then if their number is substantially higher, like, how did you arrive at that number? Well, I looked at Zillow. Okay, gotcha. I looked at some of the same, homes that Zillow did, but the difference is I made adjustments. And while it may in this market, because there's so few homes to choose from, happen to be that we get to that price point based on what other homes around you are selling for, not just have sold for. And that's why I feel like we need to let them know we are looking to the future. I have added in my pricing the marketing value of your home hitting the market right now, and what I feel like we are going to get with, it may not be 20 offers, but with a multiple offer situation. So I've already added that into my pricing. If I look at just what your house is worth, I was probably here. So you're thinking, okay, let's bump it. I already did.
Yeah, I feel like right now we're not really doing a ton of marketing. Our key usefulness is when we're negotiating. Because a lot of folks are like, oh, well, I listed it for that price, that's what I want. But in reality, we're helping them negotiate to get the best dollar or the best client,
right,
or the best buyer for them. So that's where I really push my strengths, is that I'm here to negotiate, help you negotiate, and get the top dollar or the top buyer for what you need for your situation.
Well, and I have one that was a great example of that. And, I use this as an example in other listing point presentations. I'm like, I have an older home that I put on the market. I priced it pretty high compared, I said it was really hard to comp because there's nothing like it that had sold. So, I had to go with my experience and the market data that I had, and I priced it pretty high. So, but at the end of the day, the sales price is not the most important thing to these sellers. These sellers were moving out of state. They already had where they wanted to go, but it wasn't available until February. But they wanted to, because it was such a unique property, they didn't want to wait and risk it not selling right away. I said, not only that, but it was a 100-year-old home. They didn't want to do any repairs. They knew it was a 100-year-old home. I said, and they had a lot of furniture to get rid of. So our best buyer was not just the person who paid the most. It was the person who was willing to wait 4 months to close, loved every piece of furniture they had in there, and we were able to negotiate that. So it was less headache on my seller. They ended up taking $5,000 less for the house because it was worth it to them than to, we got more because obviously of the furniture and stuff, but that whole scenario, I listened to what was important to them. And I heard, we're in our 50s and 60s, we're moving out of state, we're moving into a condo until we can move into the house that we're building. We don't know what we're going to do with all this furniture. I said, so I made that part of my listing. And I said, many of the items are for sale. And I had it listed in there. So our best buyer is somebody who came in with, hey, and you don't have to worry about moving this, and this. We're going to waive any inspections. We understand it's a 100-year-old home. We love it because it's a 100-year-old home. And, be out another offer because all the pieces of the puzzle work together. And so again, if you give them scenarios like that in a listing presentation, they're like, oh, yeah, it would be nice if I didn't have to worry about storing my stuff, or if I didn't have to worry about all the things they've already worked themselves up that is going to overwhelm them. You're slowly peeling those away.
So Cindy wanted to know how to overcome an objection when you're discussing commission and they say, well, the other brokerage was willing to list at 4%. Would you go down to 4%?
I will not go down to 4%. And I've heard, I think this comes to be where, in my opinion, I kind of go with what am I comfortable with. Again, if it's a $700,000 home that I know is going to sell, yes, I will be, negotiable on my commission to a degree, especially if they're like, we've already interviewed 3 other agents, we really like you, but they were willing to do it for this. Now, I do like Tina's rebuttal on that. Like, well, if they're willing to negotiate this easily with you, how hard are they going to negotiate on, with your buyer? I don't feel like this market cares right now. They do feel like we're shooting fish in a barrel if they're somewhat educated on the market. So I take it scenario by scenario. If it's a house I really want to list, if it's I feel like it's going to be a home run and we're going to work well together, then in this market, will I negotiate on my commission a little bit? Yes, but I don't ever go down to 4.
Yeah, no,
I
don't do 4%.
I come in with my listing paperwork filled out at 6. So if I do negotiate, I have to strike through something or delete it so that they feel like I truly did negotiate. I'll do 5, but that's as low as we'll go.
For newer agents, it's great to say, let me make a phone call and step outside, call somebody else and just have a conversation, make it so that you're not the one making that decision.
Yeah, say I have to check with my broker. Or if you're on a team, have to check with my team leader. Just always use this as a scapegoat of that. So yeah, I get emails. I just got one today where an agent's advertising how much they're cutting their commission, list. And I'm just kind of like, it's not sustainable. And then I also go back with, I was raised that you get what you pay for.
Mhm.
And, this is your largest investment. If you're going to trust somebody who, if they're selling themselves for 4% or this lower percentage, how many other people are they working with? Other sellers are doing this, they're working off of quantity over quality. And I feel like your home and your transition deserves quality instead of quantity.
So Sherry said that she went on a listing presentation this week and the sellers almost had a heart attack when they saw the brokerage amount on the net sheet took up most of their money. I'm guessing equity. Any tips for that?
It's one of those where I guess it's hard to think it took up most of their equity right now. But I would say, if you don't sell, you're not going to get any of this back. For one, what would your other options be? If you're paying me for my experience and service to help make this a transition as easy as possible for you and as profitable as possible. But this is also what I get paid to do. And I think, it's really good to say, talking about, you're not just paying for my marketing for the next 60 or 90 days, you're paying for my negotiation experience that I have built over 15 years. You're paying for the relationships that I have created that are going to help me find you the best buyer. So, while it seems like a large amount of money, again, I have also got to share this with whoever brings the best buyer. I typically don't like to do dual agency, so that's not even a conversation I get into. They're like, if you bring the buyer, I'm like, well, let me ask you, would you rather me be your coach or your referee? I feel like you're paying me to be your coach, not your referee. And I want to make sure I'm getting you the best deal possible, not just financially, but through the entire transaction. So in my opinion, it would be best if we not look at negotiating, taking out another agent, because regardless if somebody calls me on your house, I'm going to give them to another agent. I've just never had good experience in dual agency where somebody didn't feel like that you didn't push hard enough for them on either side.
Yeah, don't do that.
Ever.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for anybody in the peanut gallery on Zoom or in the real peanut gallery?
I do have one more question. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Cindy Quinlan. Thanks so much for putting this on, April. Just your last comment about dual agency. Here's my tiny issue with that. There are so many EXP agents now, which I love in our market, that I really do feel like it's going to be more common that EXP agent am the listing agent on a home, for example, and EXP agent brings the buyer. Like, I feel like that's going to be starting a lot more because there are so many of us locally now. So technically, I feel like in the listing agreement, you almost automatically have to select that could be an option. I guess each agent in that situation would be designated because they have their own agent representing seller and buyer.
Right.
Do you agree or do you not agree?
Yeah, so we do designated agency all the time. I don't have an issue with that. I have an
Okay.
issue with me being the actual listing agent and buyer's agent.
Gotcha.
So that's what, if they're trying to cut the commission and they're trying to cut out, part of my marketing fee is making sure by bringing the best buyer, I'm also offering part of my commission to another agent. If they're like, well, what if you find the buyer? Then I'm
Gotcha.
like, that's not something I'm willing to negotiate because I don't want to represent you and the buyer at the same time. I'll give it to
Gotcha.
somebody on my team. I'll give it to somebody in EXP so that they're represented and you're represented. And we call that designated dual agency because we are in the same company. But I would just rather, and I kind of go a little bit further and I'm like, no, there's no talk around the water cooler. Like there's no sharing secrets. We're not allowed
Yeah.
to do that. I said, so it's the same company. I said, but again, if it's me as the same agent as that represents the buyer and the selling agent, I have to become neutral. And now I'm more of a referee than a coach.
No. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, there is another option, which we do a lot of, is the unrepresented buyer.
Yes.
Which is also, could be a headache.
Yes. Yeah.
That is always an option too, where you don't have to discount your commission and you still get to represent the seller fully. The buyer's just completely on their own.
Yeah, I would be very leery of that. All of our conversation, we just had this in our team meeting yesterday. You always end up doing both jobs. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, I have seen that before where a buyer wanted to represent themselves. And let me tell you what happened. They ended up causing me 3 times as much work and more stress on the seller because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the normal is. They want to come in and ask for the moon because they don't understand this market and they don't understand how to be competitive. So I think it's kind of proving that value as well. Now I have had the conversation of, okay, if you found the buyer, then we can cross that bridge when we get there. If you feel like you found the best buyer, then maybe we can renegotiate if we have to. But 9 times out of 10, that gives them enough hope to keep moving, but it doesn't actually work out that they find their buyer. They don't find their best buyer. Let's get ready to say something else. I just lost it.
Well, we're at 11 o'clock
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
so
Well,
for another time.
yes. If anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I have a ton of food in the back if anybody wants to stay for lunch. I have salad, chicken, and beef tips from our leftover from our client appreciation.